lot of stuff to drill down a little bit on here. One thing comes to my mind is think tank. I lived in Santa Monica for many years. Trying to think of Raytheon.
Rand Corporation.
Rand Corporation, right.
Yeah, I work with them too, yeah.
Well, listening to you talk, you're kind of a think tank all by yourself. Now I understand why you feel so comfortable with getting out of the way and being the midwife. Don't want to, once you've launched it. Kind of give us a little idea what a think tank means, because just listening to you, it sounds like ideas just roll off of you like, water off a duck's back.
Yeah, it's a really good question, actually. First of all, I wanted to distinguish what it's not. So whenever you have a think tank that is wedded to a political ideology, that is no longer a think tank. It's an apparatus for communicating predetermined notions. So regrettably, I would have to put the Heritage Foundation in that category. Frankly, I'd put the Hoover Institute in that category.
I'm sorry, what?
The Hoover Institute is also in that category. There are other think tanks in the country, and very good ones, I might add, that are like the Academy, committed to finding out the answer to really challenging questions to the best of our ability. That's what a think tank is. And then publishing the results. And everything, when you're a think tank, everything you start with is a question. If you start with a direction or a goal or an outcome, it ain't going to work. Because what you're going to do then is you're going to use your intellectual capability to prove a point you already had in mind. Whereas in a think tank, in its truest applications, you start with a question. What is going to replace fossil fuel on the planet? Because we know we have to. That's a question. So, and to use that as an example, I've now spent 20 years with that question. In the first 2 or 3 years, I ended up looking at every form of renewable energy known to humans and or even written about by humans. And that resulted in a couple of high-level senior executive seminars we did in Santa Barbara, at least, I'm going to say 20 years ago now. And we did a panel. In that case, we brought one of their organization in with us, because a very famous guy named Amory Lovins, who you know of Amory, and who was running his institute at that point, was particularly interested in getting people to stop using incandescent light bulbs, if you remember 20 years ago. So we put together a panel, and because it was such a meaty topic, we actually did 2 panels back to back for a total of about 3.5, 4 hours, which was a lot for CEOs to take. So we put a break in the middle. And by the end of that panel, Mark, we knew we had a problem, because what we had just told all these about 300 CEOs in there and C-suite people, they didn't know anything what we were talking about. They didn't know that there was a problem called climate change. They didn't know that it was going to affect their businesses. They didn't know it was going to affect society. And they didn't know what all these renewable energy technologies were and how they could work. And said, oh my God, we got to write a book. So we then produced a book that was the content of those 2 panels. It took us a year or so to do it. And that was published 19 years ago, called Freedom from Mideast Oil, which I recommend people read to this day because it is a great handbook on renewable energy. And I started that handbook in the very first chapter. The very first subheading was called Titanic Miscalculation, where I told the story of the Titanic and the hubris that no one thought it could sink, so they intentionally didn't put enough lifeboats on it. And of course, when it sank, every human being that got into a lifeboat lived. Every single human being that did not get into a lifeboat died within 38 minutes. So if you were hanging onto a lifeboat, you were dead. If you were swimming, you were dead. You got into a lifeboat, you lived. Massive tragedy. And what I said is we're in a Titanic miscalculation about climate change. This is 20 years ago. And what we have to do is focus people's attention that this is the biggest question they have to deal with. And so we've spent all those years since then with climate change being one of our major activities as a think tank. Now, I'm going to tell you one last thing and quit, and that is at the last chapter of that book was the hydrogen economy. And people ask me to this day, did you write the book so you could make a case for the hydrogen economy? And the answer is no. I didn't write the last chapter until I wrote all the other ones. Because I knew till we got, and I had 2 great co-authors, by the way, I knew until I did that exercise, I did not know what the ultimate answer would be. That's a think tank. But it became apparent that hydrogen was the answer to the question I was asked, how are we going to replace fossil fuels? Once I knew that, then we developed a separate subcategory of technology on hydrogen, et cetera, and we could talk more about it. But we've gone on to our renewable energy group, published a paper 5 years ago, a breakthrough, what's called white paper on methane, which only now is being read widely and adopted, and which Dennis Bushnell, who's the highest ranking person at NASA that does climate change work, called me a couple of days after he got it and raved about how good it was and how accurate. And I said, great, Dennis, how do I get people to read it? He goes, I don't do that part of it. I just do the science. Good luck. And I got to tell you, until recently, it's been very difficult to get people to read it. But as recently as 10 days ago, I was asked for a copy by the chief environmental officer for JP Morgan Chase. Because the world of the business academy is business. I believe fundamentally, and this is what the academy believes, and this is what I believe with my career as well, personally, you absolutely have a duty, if you are in business, to take on those things that society needs. Because if you're not being a service to society, probably you shouldn't be in business at all.